During this week's market turmoil, investors witnessed a sort of David and Goliath scenario, with small cap stocks easily outperforming much larger companies and the overall market as well. Could this signal an opportunity for investors to make a big move into small caps? Morgan Brennan takes a look.
It's been a rough couple months for small cap stocks, with the Russell 2000 down roughly 10% from its July high. Investors have watched the group closely because they are seen as an indicator for the broader market. But this week, the index saw something of a rally, outperforming the larger Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 in what was a very tumultuous week for stocks. Some experts say this may be the start of a new trend for small caps and possibly for the markets.
We have seen the bottom and that we're going to have a pretty good fourth quarter in terms of performance. So our goal is to get back to at least break even for small cap performance on a year-to-date basis by the end of the year.
Small caps are smaller publicly traded companies with a market capitalization of $300 million to $2 billion. They're high momentum and tend to experience bigger swings than the larger, more stable blue chip stocks. But unlike the big multinational companies on the Dow, the small caps derive more than 80% of their revenue on average from the U.S., so they're more insulated from foreign market turmoil and currency headwinds associated with a stronger dollar. Analysts say small caps looked expensive for most of the year, but the recent sell-off has made them more fairly valued. As investors worry about slowing growth abroad, these stocks could become an increasingly attractive investment.
If the U.S. economy holds in there and we get to see a little bit of GDP growth, I think earnings estimates, especially for the third quarter, look pretty reasonable. And so I think you're going to see some pretty big beats, and that'll drive performance.
For that reason, DeSantis likes tech companies and industrials, but he remains wary of consumer discretionary, particularly retailers. Nonetheless, there are plenty of risks. Small caps are very volatile, and that's expected to continue. They're also more sensitive to interest rate hikes, one reason the Russell 2000 tumbled in the first place. And analysts warn that it's important to be picky, to do research and invest in certain stocks specifically. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan.
Mike Balkin joins us now to talk more about what's going on in those small cap stocks, which remain down about 7% for the year and off about 10% from their intraday summertime highs. Mike, welcome. Good to see you. I guess we shouldn't be surprised that small caps have been more volatile than big company shares all summer. They're doing what we kind of expect them to do, aren't they?
Well, certainly they're doing what we expect them to do. Usually October is one of the worst months for small cap performance out of the year each time. And again, we're not really surprised. Maybe the volatility's been a little more than most would have expected. But given the strong performance that small caps had last year and the first part of this year, it's not a surprise to us.
So is the new trend to buy small caps? Is this the time to start filling your portfolio with some of these smaller companies?
Well, we certainly think so. We have found valuations to be somewhat challenging for a good part of the year, and the last few weeks have given us a lot of great buying opportunities. I know some of our analysts are salivating at where some of the stocks have gone here over the last few weeks. So we think this is a good time to be buying small caps, and that's not to say there's not going to be a few more bumps in the road along the way, but small caps tend to act somewhat poorly going into midterm elections and then tend to act pretty well coming out of that. So I wouldn't expect this time to be any different.
So I don't want you to show your hand totally here, but you say you've been buying. What have you been buying?
Well, I tell you, I'd have to shoot you if I told you what we'd be buying. But there's a lot of tech stocks that look a lot more interesting to us right now. And we're actually starting to dabble a little bit around the edges on some of the consumer names. But I think on the whole, things are looking a lot more interesting across all the sectors.
But you know, Mike, it is hard to find good small caps. I mean, how do you even research this if you're an individual investor? With the large caps, you know to look at the blue chips, some of the big household names, some of the biggest companies in America. But when it comes to small caps, even Morgan, when she was reporting, says you've got to be selective and picky. Are you better off just buying into a small cap fund like yours? Or how do you identify these small winners?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, again, I think buying a fund makes a lot more sense. Now, again, I'm biased since I do run a small cap fund, but I think it's very difficult to go out on your own and do a lot of research on these small companies. We've got 10 analysts across all the different sectors scouring across the nation looking for some of the best small cap ideas out there. And I think that, again, that's the way to do it. And buying companies with good fundamentals at good valuations, over the long run, you're going to make good money there.
Is the economic climate, in your view, right now favorable to small caps? In other words, you know, large cap shares are vulnerable, I think, to a rising dollar. Small caps less so because they derive most of their income from domestic sales.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, again, small caps being less liquid do tend to be a lot more volatile than the large caps. But I think people right now, early in the year, it was let's buy the large cap stocks with good international exposure because everybody thought that Europe was recovering and China was getting stronger. And now some of the more recent news we're seeing is that Europe's weakening and China's slowing down a little bit. So people are scurrying back to the United States and buying some of the small cap companies.